Have you heard, some people said that President Trump said that Bitcoin is the new oil. Have you heard that?
I did. And, if it's a strategic asset, yeah. Because, what he's probably referring to is that the countries that have oil have strategic power in a way that everyone else doesn't, right? I mean, think about Japan and Germany versus the US or the Middle East or Russia. US, Middle East, Russia produce and export power, which powers everything that everyone needs, and for cars, etc. And so President Trump is saying Bitcoin is the strategic asset. He is correct. I agree. But I do think that means the U.S. needs to, of course, have a strategic reserve.
Right. And we haven't seen that yet. I just thought of something. I think I heard you on a show being asked about how the United States might acquire Bitcoin. And going out into the market, I mean, that would definitely move the price. So didn't you say something about the possibility that the government would actually instead try to, let's say, buy a company that has a lot of Bitcoin?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that makes a lot of sense. I think the day the U.S. says they want to acquire 1 million Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin's price is going to go up parabolically.
Right.
Because how is the U.S. going to buy it? I mean, they can't, if you know their wallet, you're going to see every buy, and it's going to become a national pastime for everybody because they're a long buyer. I think it's going to be easier for them to buy large holders of Bitcoin. Maybe even give tax amnesty, right? That's why they're saying it's tax-free. We won't tax capital gains. They'll do everything they can to try to acquire Bitcoin. Maybe, but MicroStrategy has a sovereign put. They have 600,000 Bitcoin. That's the easiest way to get to 1 million Bitcoin.
Well, so how would that work, though? I mean, for people watching that think, like, property rights, hello, I mean, those are enshrined in our Constitution. Would a company have to sell to the government as long as they're willing to pay fair market? I mean, like, could they essentially nationalize a company? I mean, how does it work logistically?
Well, the U.S. has a history of acquiring and paying for strategically important things.
They just did so with the rare earths. I mean, the Pentagon deal with MP, I feel like it's not nationalizing it, but it's a strategic move.
Yeah, I think the U.S. government takes a private sector approach to that. So if MicroStrategy is at 400 and the clearing price to do that deal is 3,000 or something, it's probably cheaper to do that than to try to buy 1 million Bitcoin.
What do you think Michael Saylor's reaction to that would be?
I'm not Michael Saylor, but I know that his personal holdings of Bitcoin he'll never sell, right? And he'll let them essentially become, he'll help permanently help Bitcoin's legacy because he'll just let the keys expire with him. But for MicroStrategy shareholders, he might have a different view because at the end of the day, he'll probably weigh where he can get MicroStrategy versus someone making a hostile takeover bid. I mean, it's just hypothetical. So,
well, I mean, is this like your base case? Do you think that the government will acquire Bitcoin by just acquiring one of these companies?
If I had to war game that, there's 600,000 Bitcoin in MicroStrategy.
Yeah, on the way to more. Gosh, that's so fascinating. I have so many questions. Okay, well, let's take this in another direction.
Can you imagine the U.S. like on Coinbase trying to hit the buy button? Right. I mean, like, what's going to happen? Like,
exactly. Well, I wanted to ask you because you're always tweeting about, Bitcoin is the way. You're super bullish on Bitcoin, but then you're also tweeting that you think Ethereum is the best macro trade of the decade, and you're building an Ethereum treasury company. I personally don't understand it. And even Michael Saylor, I think, has said recently that he doesn't see a compelling reason to do so with any other digital asset but Bitcoin. So can you explain your point of view on this?
Yes. I don't see this as a conflict. It's the same reason why someone who says they like Tesla but they like Palantir, because they're both scarce stocks, right? Like there's one Tesla because there's only one Elon Musk in the world. And there's only one Palantir because while it's not completely clear exactly how Palantir transforms companies, you can see whether it's a hospital in Michigan or wherever, they are really providing superhuman powers to a business. So, you should own both. Bitcoin to me is a proven blockchain that, in my mind, is storing value. And it is, as like Michael Saylor says, it's immaculate. And I do think the simplest way to think of it is it's replacing gold. So at least let's get to 1 million, and then we can see how much further Bitcoin goes. But the world is also grappling with the digitalization of everything that we do. And so we're storing information, and we're tokenizing businesses, and we're tokenizing the dollar, and stablecoins have become so important, in fact, from a policy perspective, because stablecoins are now actually big buyers of treasuries collectively. I mean, that's why you may say you don't have to worry about deficits because stablecoins will buy the debt. Well, that is the ChatGPT moment for crypto, because what's happened is that the first killer app for crypto has emerged that is now seeing widespread adoption, which is stablecoins. And now Wall Street is running to tokenize and maybe even financialize their entire system on the blockchain. But that means they require smart contracts. So they're not fighting with Bitcoin. Bitcoin paved the way for Wall Street to recognize that you don't have to have tangible assets to create value. But if you're going to tokenize what Wall Street does, and you tokenize stocks and real estate, you need smart contracts. And the biggest and most secure blockchain with no downtime is Ethereum. And it's legally compliant. And the majority of stablecoins and real-world assets that have been tokenized are taking place on Ethereum. So to me, that is the macro moment. So in 2017, when I first wrote about Bitcoin, I saw this as the time when Wall Street would eventually come to recognize Bitcoin's importance. So Bitcoin, of course, had already accomplished a lot because it reached 100 billion in network value. And that's why I wrote about it. It's like, if you don't believe in something that gets to 100 billion, like, you got to pay attention to. And our thesis was that Wall Street would start to view this as just digital gold. Well, I think Ethereum is having its 2017 moment now, because now is the time that Wall Street will take tokenization seriously, and it's taking place on Ethereum. So I do think it is the biggest macro trade for the next decade.
I just see so much risk, because when they made the trade-off to proof of stake, they introduced a lot of complexities, centralization risks. There have been issues in terms of more vectors for attack when they do bridges and the layer 2s. There are other protocols that do smart contracts. A lot of people are working on the functioning of that with Bitcoin, right, to enable smart contracts on Bitcoin. So how do you mitigate the risk in Ethereum that a lot of people see? I mean, the SEC could still classify it as a security.
Yes. Well, these risks that you describe seem like smaller risks compared to the fragility of the existing financial system, right? So let's say, what is the financial system's value in the U.S. in the real world today? Well, the GDP is 80 trillion, and the financial system is 80 trillion, and that runs on plumbing that, if you're raising risks, are far more fragile. We are using trust vectors that are, in some cases, arcane systems, transfer agents that, rubber stamp things. I mean, look at the level of fraudulent activity on a traditional financial system ledger. JP Morgan, who I think is leading in terms of security for its customers and trying to do fraud prevention, still about 7% of their activity is suspicious. So you can't prevent infiltration. So is Ethereum superior to that? Yeah. I mean, so if you're comparing it to Bitcoin, we're comparing the wrong analog, is my opinion.
So if you had to put all your money into one, though, over the next 10 years, would you choose Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Now, why are we making that a choice?
I'm just curious. If you could just only choose one.
Well, if I had to choose, because I'm chairman of BitMine, which is an Ethereum treasury, then I, of course, would choose Ethereum.
Well, one of the reasons I asked is you had this great clip that I actually saw a couple months back of Stanley Druckenmiller.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about how you don't need to have 30 ideas. You don't need to diversify. In fact, one idea strongly held can actually outperform everything else. And
Actually, he didn't say one idea.
Okay, so
he says
a
couple of ideas. You only need a couple ideas.
Well, okay.
So that's why I'm asking about why it's one.
Okay, fair enough. Obviously, my idea is Bitcoin.
Yeah, but I'm just going to say, in my 30 years of investment history, investing experience, I've never been told to have only one choice.
Okay.
And I've never seen anyone make a good decision based on one choice. Just,
all right, fair enough. One thing I do believe in is free markets. Let's see what happens over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share that people should really be paying attention to, that you've been watching closely, or that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that you may have listeners that are kind of curious about Bitcoin, but, they have to also appreciate that every generation, like we're talking about Generation Alpha now. They are native. They're born native, and they're also going to be born in a world of AI. And so this idea of like physical money and only physical things represent value is not going to exist. So I think that's why Bitcoin's future, the best years are still ahead. For crypto, Bitcoin, obviously, and Ethereum. Not everyone will agree on Ethereum, but because we have another generation of people and decision makers that are really growing up as in a world where AI is prevalent in their lives, and then really a token economy. So I think the best years are still ahead. Yeah,
the AI revolution is so fascinating to me. It's going to change everything that we do, just like the internet did. Some of it's scary, but I love that you are one of the people that's very hopeful, very positive about it. So Tom, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Where can people follow your work?
Well, if you want to get our research, you can go to fsinsight.com. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's @Fundstrat.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you.